Well, hey, Eastlake, it's Kristen and Peter here with
Hey, everybody.
you. And we're recording a Christmassy kind of message, we think. And so I tried to be festive. For those of you who are listening, it's okay, you won't notice this, you won't be able to tell. But I'm wearing red and I'm drinking from my Christmas mug, and I'm sitting in front of my family's gingerbread houses, which I have to point out there's four because one time we tried to do one together and it just went really poorly. It
Nope,
went
nope, nope.
so poorly that now we all get our own because we all have our own ways of wanting to do it. And
Yeah,
so that's why there's four. Um,
smart.
Again, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't tell, but my husband's will always look like an actual house because he's a builder. And then my daughter's is always like, she's very artistic. So she tried to do this whole painting thing with the frosting, and then she gets bored and leaves. So it's like not done. And then my son's is like, how much candy can you fit on this thing? Like just pouring out of all sides and angles. And then Andy told me mine is what did he call it? Boring and symmetrical. Because
Is
I
that a
like
compliment?
I consider it because I copy the box and just make things look
You
like
follow the rules. You
I
follow the
do.
Lego instructions. That's smart to do multiple gingerbread houses. We've landed on that too, mostly just because we have to have a designated house that our 3-year-old can come steal the candy off of when we're not looking. Like if we don't give him his own house, he's going to take all the candy off the other ones, which would be a war zone for that future. Every kid needs their own house to steal candy
Yeah.
from.
Well, ours is
My
high, so they can't get it anymore.
Oh well, my kids are just climbers or something. I don't know. They figured it out. I did see a meme about climbing, by the way. My the kid like I can't reach a sippy cap, and it's like a foot away from him. Like I can't reach. Can you help? Meanwhile, like he's also on the fridge grabbing M&Ms, right? So anyway, that's our life. You look so festive. Congratulations on that. I feel like you definitely win the Christmas Spirit Award. All I'm bringing to the table from a Christmas spirit standpoint is a green background. At least that's something. It's some contribution, right? I almost wore a red hoodie, but I worry that we'd be twins. And I just figured I'll change it up and go neutral.
Nice. Um, okay, well, we feel like we should have some sort of message for Christmas.
Yeah.
And um, we've gotten out of it the last few years. We've had Jason do a couple of like season ending winter messages. And I actually look back on the last Christmas talk I did, I think was in 2017. And
Amazing.
actually looked back at my notes and some of the same stuff we're going to be talking about today. So I felt proud of myself that I had evolved.
Didn't have to delete
And,
any of it.
well, I mean, I would, there's something that's not going to be included today, but I was just like proud of myself that in 2017, I had some of these thoughts that we're talking about today. So
I
anyway,
love it.
I think the part of it that is strange and what we've kind of been talking about is if there's any part of you that has gone through some sort of faith transition or faith shift, not necessarily even out of evangelicalism, but maybe beyond, then when you come up upon holidays like Christmas and Easter that are very central to the Christian calendar, you have these thoughts of like, okay, so what do we do? Is this for me? It feels different. It might look different. And how do we kind of manage that? And so that's what you and I have been talking about, even just as friends, when we talk about like, like, hey, Peter, what are you and Brittany telling your kids about this or that? Or
Yeah.
and so that's kind of the discussion we're going to have today is how our views of Christmas have changed. And I would say evolved into something even bigger and more beautiful than it was before.
Yeah. I certainly agree. And our discussions we've been having have been reminders of, I think, our evolution, my personal evolution. And then having kids, when you have like when you remember what you were told about this season, and now I'm sharing what I think this season is about. It's different, and I think they're at least growing up quite evangelical. You're kind of handed this script about here's why Christmas is extremely important, and it's all about the birth of Christ, and it's all about the star and the future Messiah and the narrative that I'm assuming many of us are familiar with. My kids are very excited about the Fisher Price nativity that they can throw at each other, which right, we still have a nativity in our house, right? That hasn't changed because the Jesus narrative is a massive part of Christmas in America for sure, right? Not necessarily in every country, but in our country, like the Jesus Christmas narrative isn't going anywhere, and so we're certainly speaking to that. But how we frame it's probably a little bit different than how I was taught about it. And I think, at least for me, the way I think about it, or how I'm kind of currently concluding what I think about the Jesus part of Christmas, is that I include it, and I include other meaningful parts of what the season can be about as well. So the way I see it is that I'm not, I don't reject the Jesus story as being a tremendously important part of Christmas narrative. But I also include other stories. There's other versions of the story. And I think sometimes that can be heard as like, that's not true. And I don't think that's my experience at all. Like, I think there's a ton of beauty and truth and compelling ideas about the Jesus narrative and his birth and all the stories that are told about Jesus. All those things, there's a ton of things that can be really compelling about that. And then I've just found other stories to also be interesting. And I like to include more stories around this season in my perspective, to just have more beauty and truth, if that makes sense. So it's not a rejection for me as much as maybe a expansion. It's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. Oh, back to the transcend and include, right?
Transcend and include.
Oh,
Transcend
that's
and
been a
include.
motto for like a really long time. I feel the same way. I feel like growing up in a church world, it was like Jesus is the reason for the season, and everything else was kind of what are the words, like secular, outside, like
Pagan. False narratives, right?
yeah.
Those are some things I've heard for sure.
Yeah, or like the idea, I think just the idea that like other people are stealing a Christian holiday
Yeah.
when they put up a tree and they celebrate and they don't even believe in Jesus. Like that was kind of what I not from my family, but from the church world. That was what I
Yeah.
kind of received. And I feel like for
Just
me,
hold on, just that sentence though. Like, other people are stealing a Christian holiday
I
because they're
know,
putting up a tree. It's
I
just
know,
like the most. They're like, where is the tree's not in our nativity set? I'll just put it that way.
I know, I know. But that's what I think of when I think of any sort of Christmas celebration that's not centralized on the baby Jesus. So, but I think in my evolution, it's just allowed the holiday to, I think that transcend and include, to include more. It makes it feel more full. It makes it
Mm-hmm.
feel bigger and more inclusive, and all of the things that I think Jesus would want a celebration to be, which is so funny to say. So I just feel like there was a little bit of fear when you start to pull apart some aspects of your religious tradition. There's fear that you're going to lose something. And I think for me, it feels relief to be like, oh, but I feel like I've gained more. So that's where I'm coming from when it comes to Christianity and Christmas. And then I wanted to introduce kind of to EastLake this book that we've been reading. It's
Yes.
called For Small Creatures Such as We by Sasha Sagan. And we're going to be talking about it a lot in 2023, I think. But so Sasha is the daughter of Carl Sagan. Tom told me I was pronounced. Did I pronounce it okay?
I
Tom
think you
told me
said
I
it
have
great.
Tom said I had an accent. I don't
You
mean
mid
to.
you called you Midwestern. Your how
Yeah.
you say your A's. No,
Yes.
Sagan. You said it great.
Carl Sagan. Um, so my kind of view, my memories of like Carl Sagan were atheist scientist
Doesn't
and
believe in God.
doesn't believe in God. And this book that his daughter wrote. So I used to have this idea that an atheistic view of the world was so empty. They didn't believe in anything, and how sad that must be. That was kind of the
Totally. It's hopeless, right? By
yes.
default, right? There's
Yeah.
void of purpose, nihilism, right? Like there's no meaning to anything now.
Yes. Which is so um ill-informed.
Right.
So much
Yeah.
of the views
Sounds
that
like
I
you've
used.
never talked to an atheist before.
But anyway, this book has been really transformative for me. It was brought to us by Peter's wife, Brittany, and to our leadership team that is planning 2023. And so we've all been reading it. And I have just loved it. And I think the thing that is most striking to me is that reading this book from her perspective, she talks about rituals and seasons and holidays and all of these things. The thing that was so striking to me is that because of her belief that there is no provable anything after this life, and because of her strong holding in like scientific proof and things like that, because of that, it's not that everything is dark, it's that everything is more meaningful and more miraculous. That life is that much more precious because we don't know what lies beyond it. And that was surprising for me and really moving for me.
Certainly. Yeah. And I think too, for those of you following along, we'd encourage you to pick up the book and kind of follow along even throughout the year. The length of the book or the structure of the book kind of goes through the seasons and some of the different holidays, and shares like how are these celebrated across cultures? How is the winter solstice, which is what Christmas is revolving around, or there's holidays across every culture during this time of year. So we were focusing on that for this talk, but we'd encourage you to kind of pick it up and go through it for the year too, because I think it will help you if you are kind of asking some of the same questions that Kristen brought up at the beginning. Is like without a narrative that like infuses meaning as this is the only reason why we celebrate Christmas and there's no other good reason, or what is meaningful about spring, what is meaningful about summer, what is meaningful about these different kind of natural breaks in our calendar. I think this book could be helpful for you as you're like all of us are trying to live meaningfully and live intentionally. And so I love her perspective on it. And regardless, I don't think you need to like the book isn't to try to isn't trying to convince anybody either to hold an atheistic perspective
No.
or an agnostic perspective. I think it's trying to share that even from a perspective that is scientific in its worldview, looking for evidence to support things. It's not a lot of room for magic in her worldview. She has essentially been very intentional about being focusing on meaning and living meaningfully.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're trying to do is just like infuse our life with meaning. And so we're looking at all these things that we do in our life and we're like, what is the meaning behind it? And so I think that's part of what this whole Christmas thing is what is the meaning behind it? What kinds of multiple meanings can we bring into this season? So I think one of the interesting things was when she talked about, and we've known this is part of one of my messages, the 2017 message was kind of the Christianity co-opting the winter solstice. I don't know. Do you want to talk about
Yep.
that? I thought that was it's
Yes,
just so
I
interesting
love
to
it.
me.
Yeah, and I'll just read a quote from the book too. This is in the winter chapter, but the quote from Sasha Sagan says, "Whenever the birth of Jesus was, that's what she's talking about. The commemoration of his birth wasn't established until about 3 centuries later, 300 years after his birth, when Roman church leaders decided it should be on December 25th. They did this so that they could co-opt the existing polytheistic Roman holidays that centered around the winter solstice. In the leap year less Julian calendar, the shortest day of the year was on or within a day of December 25th. This made things a little easier on Romans as they bid goodbye to their many gods and adjusted to life as Christians." And I never knew that. I like never connected the dots about why the 25th was chosen. I was still growing up that probably wasn't his actual birthday, but I never knew that the reason why it wound up on the 25th was because it was from a previous holiday.
Yeah. I had found that out years back, and I remember having a conversation with some fairly like fundamental evangelical people and bringing that up, and it was like shocking to them. And just a reminder too of like the little steps that we take in moving in our faith is that like, so what do you do with new information? And something like that doesn't have to change anything, or it can, depending on how tightly you hold your beliefs. So anyway, I thought it was interesting how she went through like all kinds of different religions and cultures, and how it's like universal to celebrate the solstice, and how like for centuries different cultures have been celebrating essentially the return of light, which is what it is. And you and I were talking about like, why is that such a celebration? And it's probably because winter was so hard.
Yeah, I mean, did you say was? Because I still find it hard today. And I have electricity,
I know.
and here I am seated in my warm house.
The sun set at like 4:13 the other day, and I was like, what in the world is happening? But if you think about like 1,000 years ago, what would that have been like?
Worse, like way worse. And also like it's hard now. So like if you think about how cold it would be, and how like I was thinking about food and talking to the kids about this the other day, like the experience of food in winter, like you have to store nothing's the only food you have was the food that you packed away in salt or in the ground, or like I mean, you can keep it in the snow. It can be refrigeratable, but it's old food. And like, and think about even getting close to like in the book, she talks about imagine the first strawberry of the new season and how big of a deal it would feel to be like finally eating a strawberry again. And now we're like, oh, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go have an avocado in December because I can have access to anything, mangoes, or there's no shortage of strawberries in our life. And so I think sometimes that the challenge of the growing season and the experience of like the celebration of like a spring party because you've been in the depths of winter, we might not have an appreciation for it like I think they would have a long time ago. Even the light piece, if you think about the winter holiday without electricity, like candle light was all you had, right? And I feel like our house is so dark all the time, and we have lighting in every room, right? But like the natural light is gone at 4, and like Brittany and I the other day are talking about like I'm just talking grumpy and I'm being annoying, and we're both just talking about like I just feel like I can't go outside. It's too cold to go outside. It's too rainy to go outside. It's too dark. Or I can't go run around at 4 because I might slip on the ice or whatever. Right. So I just think the winter, like the purpose of having a holiday is like now. What did she say in the book? Now more than any other time in the middle of winter, in the middle of darkness, like we need to throw a party. We need to throw a party to be reminded that light is coming.
Yeah. Yeah. She said, more than any other time of the year, we need a holiday in the dead of winter. We need something to remind us that darkness is not forever.
Right.
And I think about that, of course, like figuratively too. Like there's so much that is dark and hard. And we need a reminder that it doesn't last forever, though it feels like it might. And so I think I appreciate that perspective too, of just the history and trying to imagine life without this house and all the amenities that we have. Like you said, I can go to the grocery store today after this and buy fruit from the Philippines and Mexico, and but also just the reminder that any type of darkness doesn't last forever, and that can be hard to remember. So a time when we actually celebrate that we can remind ourselves that there is light coming. If every Christmas light we look at reminds us of that, then there's so much more meaning to it. When I sit and stare at my tree, it's not just beautiful, it's beautiful because it's a reminder that there is light in the darkness.
I love that.
So I think, what we've talked about is that like there's shifts and expansions of meaning for us when it comes to this holiday. And so I wanted to kind of talk through. So now what does it look like? What are these intentional things that we're doing? And how do we use our holiday traditions, but with a more like informed and expansive point of view? So what are your thoughts on that? What kinds of things? How has your holiday expanded?
Well, in a number of ways, but I think the big like takeaway for me from this experience of kind of reflecting on how has Christmas changed or grown for me has to do with, by the way, is that super loud?
Nope.
Can you hear things through my, okay, because I have my 3-year-olds here, and so I wasn't sure if you were able to hang out with them, if
Oh,
everybody else
hi,
gets
Benny.
to
No,
be
I can't hear
okay,
him.
good, good. Well, I think one of the biggest things that I've been kind of reflecting on is, and I think we're going to have more discussions on this, but what parts of the Christian tradition still apply, regardless of your worldview. I thought about, I think one of my favorite quotes in the book had to do with the tree and some of the thoughts on the evergreen tree. I wanted to read it, but she says the use of the evergreen trees, wreaths, and garlands symbolize eternal life was a custom of ancient Egyptians, Chinese, and Hebrews. Tree worship was common among Europeans and survived their conversion to Christianity. Have you ever wondered, why am I bringing this tree in? Like, was that like, is that in the Jesus story? It's not in the Jesus story. That's just something that if you're Christian, like you probably did that all growing up. And if you didn't grow up Christian, you probably have some kind of tree. Most, at least Americans, have a Christmas tree in their house that they either hauled in like Clark Griswold or they unpacked from a box like I did this year, assembled and plugged in, right? But to think about, like, that's a holiday or a tradition that has been in existence across cultures for thousands of years. It's just crazy to think about. But she said humans have been decorating trees, particularly evergreens, for eons for good luck and as a reminder of what spring will bring. It's like this way to look into our living room and be like, spring's coming.
Yeah.
Spring's coming, no matter how dark this season. Like, we know light's on the way. And then this last thing I never thought about. I feel like such a doofus for not knowing this, but that's why ornaments look so much like fruit. So if you think about your Christmas tree, you probably have these like beautiful. My mom always had these beautiful glass balls that were always at the top that I couldn't reach because I would break them. That's how we do it in our house too. I have a Gonzaga University ornament that looks like a huge blueberry, and I didn't think about the fact that it's a tree, right? It's a tree that's supposed to look like a fruit tree, because if you're
In
in
the middle of
darkness and you're
winter.
not eating fruit, how beautiful would it be to have a tree as a reminder that fruit's on the way, that growth is on the way, that blossoms are on the way. I just love that idea, and that is just an expansion for me of like ways to bring meaning to the holiday. And I think it makes my attitude better when I have to go dig up so much Christmas stuff, because there's just like so many boxes of decorations. And full transparency, I can be annoying and grumpy about that stuff, right? Like, I can be it's work. It's work to celebrate. It's work to throw a party. It's work to decorate your house. So to be reminded of why we're doing this, what's it supposed to be a reminder of or symbolic for, I found helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Andy and I always bicker at the tree at some point. So that's helpful.
Right.
I think one of the things for me is just the idea of marking time.
Yeah.
That every year in December, there are things that we do that mark time. And that's been really important to me. As I've kind of read this book and kind of pondered, and also the natural evolution of a family is you watch your kids get older and older, and there's this kind of panic. Like, I feel this panic that my kids are going to be old soon.
Yeah.
And so I really have this like deep down innate desire to mark the time. And I find it interesting that like our government and our society as a whole has kind of accepted that. Like,
right.
Everybody gets December 25th off and New Year's off. And it's kind of like everybody is saying, just stop if you can, stop and enjoy. And I know that that's like a little bit reductive and not everybody can stop and enjoy, but I think that's part of what these holidays are for me, is just a moment to stop and enjoy. And I told Peter earlier, This year when I turned on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, and as soon as it started, I started crying. I was like,
Yeah.
what is happening to me? And it was just because it was this marking of time, like the Christmas season begins when that music starts, when that parade starts, and it's like the bluey balloon and the
Yeah.
Rockettes. But it had me emotional because I was looking at my kids and they were on the couch with Andy, and just I appreciate, and I will take any and every moment to recognize what's good in my life and what we have.
Yeah. I think that's even what sometimes the holidays offer us is like that ability to see that I'm experiencing something, like that ability to notice yourself
Mm.
being thankful, right? Like, because you can like be thankful for when JB and Hallie are watching a cartoon with Andy too. But for some reason, when it's the holiday and when it's like this natural, like the house is decorated, we're watching this thing, right? Like Brittany's never teared up when I watch Monday Night Football with the boys. But it's still like it is something you could tear up over because this is like why you're trying to spend time together, right? So I love that about how the holidays kind of create those noticing moments, this ability that we can then see like this is I'm lucky or I'm fortunate or I feel grateful that I get to experience this moment when I think sometimes it's harder to do that in the day to day. I
Yeah.
was thinking about our most recent family trip. We went over and visited my wife's grandma, and when you think about marking time, like we brought Thanksgiving to grandma because grandpa's not there anymore, and grandpa
Mm.
was there a couple years ago, and he wasn't. He passed away 2020, and um, it's a when you talk about marking time, like the holidays are this like reminder that like life is short
Mm.
and to be present and to be grateful for these moments and to be grateful for Thanksgiving with grandma
Mhm.
because it's just grandma this year and we won't go to grandma's house every year for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
This is a chapter that you're in when without grandpa and with grandma. I was listening to this Ben Rector song, and some people love him. Maybe you. I'm not sure if you even know who he is, but he
Nope.
talks about really meaningful things. And he has this Thanksgiving song that he wrote and it talks about all the kids from the kids table are now moved to have kids of their own, right?
Yeah.
And I can see my grandpa's eyes in my nephew, and this idea of like essentially growing older, and the holidays are this reminder of these moments are really precious and they're not forever.
Yeah.
I was even thinking about that as Joel, my 8-year-old, is talking about Santa and talking about kids believing in Santa and how he's excited for Santa to come this year. And Tess, my 10-year-old, is smiling and just listening, and she looks over and winks at me because she's lost the magic when it comes to Santa, and just recognizing that like that chapter's over for one of my
Yeah.
children, and Christmas is not worse. It's not like you have to have Santa to have a meaningful Christmas, but like that window with we're one down and a couple to go, but
Yeah.
it's a different experience of Christmas, and so I think it's an important thing to kind of it helps you mark time and to find meaning in the moment.
Yeah. I know I cried again at another thing on TV when there's a Fred Meyer commercial and it
Yes.
says, it shows like this evolution of
Is
a
this the
family.
drop it low, the coupon one that I love so much? No,
No,
not
no, we
that
love
one.
that one too. But it shows this evolution of family in a cookbook, and it says today's holidays are tomorrow's memories. And I
Yeah.
feel that same way of like my grandparents are gone and they were here. So
Hmm.
the uniqueness of holidays to mark time is really important.
Yeah.
I feel like the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about is just the idea of anticipation. Like Christmas is literally anticipation for kids. That's like really all it is. Just like the
Yep.
countdowns and the advent calendars and the like just waiting for Christmas morning, and how like winter solstice was the anticipation of light returning, not actual
Yep.
springtime. It was
Yep.
like this hope and expectation that what was true in the past is going to be true again this year, and that it does
Hmm.
get better and it does return. And so I feel like Christmas gives me that opportunity of like anticipation.
Mm.
And I think maybe even anticipation can be viewed as hope. And hope's been a tricky word for me. over the last few years, but I feel like Christmas can be a time for me to acknowledge that like there are things to be hopeful for and
Hmm.
about. And especially for those people who find themselves in like a season of darkness, like the
Yeah.
reminder that it doesn't stay dark forever, and that can be really hard. But sometimes you need the reminder of that because it doesn't feel true at the time. And so maybe like a child asking for gifts, I feel like I might need to train myself a little bit in hope. Like,
Yeah.
so I've been doing this kind of exercise with myself in anticipation of this talk, of this, conversation with you, of just recognizing that so much of my mental load is the mundane of life. I like literally go through my
Hmm.
day and I'm like, don't forget the laundry. Have we done dishes? Pack the lunches. Where's the homework? Oh my gosh, the laundry. Do it again because it's sat in the
Yeah.
wash for a day. Um, and
Totally.
like, did I take the garbage cans out? I need to go to the grocery store. What's for dinner? Just my days pass really quickly with, and not that those things are bad. Just I'm not spending my days hoping about what could be. And I think that there's a time
Mm.
for that, and I need to make time for that. And so trying to think through in this Christmas season, the way my kids are pondering, like, what gifts are they going to get?
Yeah.
Trying to be like, what could hope look like for me? What if I took that risk and did that thing? What
Yeah.
could that look like? What could 2023 look like if I did that thing? Or what if I focused on this relationship and actually tried to make it better? What if there was hope in that? And what could it look like? What's the best version that I can imagine for myself? And trying to think about that because it does give me a sense of hope if I can picture something being different or better.
I love that. And I think that can be hard. Like if for people who've been listening and following along, like if you've been in a season where it feels like things haven't clicked, or you're stuck in a rut, or you're facing challenges or a lot of heartache or pain, it's a super vulnerable feeling to hope because to think that things can change, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot safer emotionally to assume things aren't going to get better. There's plenty of evidence for doom. If you
Yeah.
haven't like been on social media or read a news article recently, like the algorithms are gonna keep sending us negative things because those get more attention and more clicks. So I think it's hard. It can be hard to be hopeful. I do like the idea of, and I'm not. I hope this isn't heard from anybody who's in the midst of a bunch of pain or challenge too. Like this isn't supposed to be trite. Like just try hard to hope. Like I'm
Yeah.
not saying that in the least. But I think to be at some level a healthy human that is able to contribute to the world, I think you have to, like, if that's this idea of like we're part of this community, we're trying to live as a beneficial presence in the world. If at our core we're like, I can't change, and nothing in my situation can change, it's hard to, I think, contribute to making the world a better place if you wear that as your default. So
Yeah.
even if you can't wear that all the time, given that challenge of your season, I think adopting a hopeful posture, or some maybe once a week or an hour a week, I'm gonna like let my mind go towards what could be and how I might be able to change and grow into a more beautiful version of myself. I think that adopting that as a value would be really good. Like if more people, I think it's more uncommon than it is common to choose to be hopeful. And again, that isn't to say that there isn't reason to not hope, but I think it helps us live more beautifully when we live that way, or when we commit to that type of life.
Yeah.
I think it gives us a better chance, at least, at one changing. Like if you think you're never going to change and nothing will change, like you're probably right. um, so, but if you adopt an attitude or mentality that things could change and I could grow, I think that increases your chances of it being true. And I certainly think it helps with making the world more beautiful. It's
I
hard,
was
but I think
I
it's
was
something important.
I was rereading part of this book this morning before we were getting on here, and I found this part that I didn't register the first time, but again, I cried when I read it this morning. And she's talking
Yeah.
about, because she's from a Jewish heritage and her husband is from a Christian heritage, so she has a lot of these conversations about what are they doing for their kids. And she talked about how she surprised herself by wanting her daughter to have a Christmas morning, and that she felt a
Mm.
little bit like an imposter. And she said, I even put her in some red and green pajamas friends had given us. Who am I right now? I asked John, her husband. And then she wrote this, maybe just a mom who wants her child to have everything wonderful there is under the sun.
Yeah.
I get teary just saying that now. Like, there's, I mean, I just feel like, isn't that one of the most aspirational things that you could hope for with a holiday, is a reminder that, you know, we're people who just want wonderful things for the people in our life. And if you
Yeah.
can have a holiday remind you of that and give you ways to act on it, then like, how beautiful.
That's so beautiful. I think it's pretty natural as a parent to want that for your kids. I think it can be hard to allow yourself to want that for yourself, or
Yeah.
to believe it's even possible. So I do love the motivation, or um, the mind, like it tricks us into thinking it's possible, which
Mm-hmm.
again, like part of life is believing things are possible in order to, I think, start to move forward with it. So I love that idea.
Yeah. I think lastly too, and this is kind of the same, but um this idea, like I just said, of like aspiring, I feel like Christmas serves up this like opportunities to be all the things you've wanted to be generous and
Hmm.
joyful and um to celebrate peace on earth, all of these things. Like, it's like an inferno of
Yeah.
thinking of these things and trying to imagine, how do I do this in my life? And I'll admit, like, I think Andy and I are generous people, but we're way more generous during the holiday season. It just is the way it is. And so
Yeah.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to be reminded of that. Like, these are people, this is the type of person we want to be. And Christmas reminds me of that.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too. I was thinking, I kind of listed out like, what are the things that Christmas, like, I do because it's Christmas. Like I do these things, and I was just thinking about like, well, I try to be more patient, and
Mm-hmm.
like I'm open to like I want to like extend love to my friends and family, and I like want to be loved by them, right? Giving and receiving of love, like a really important thing about being a human is to be able to give and receive love. I want to have gratitude. So like the kids asked me what I want for Christmas this year, and like I've kind of moved on from like it making or breaking like how good my Christmas goes, like what I get. Like I had to give that one up. Like that Christmas is either gonna go great or not, depending on what gifts I ask for and receive. And
P.S. I have already bought all of my own gifts.
yeah, right, exactly. Like you know what? Like if it's not
Like,
important to me,
here
like
it is. This is which one is in the red paper. This is
right.
what you got me.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna be like mad at my brother-in-law all year long because like he didn't give me the right exact thing. Whatever. Like I can still like I want to like enjoy the day. It doesn't have to be about receiving.
Yes.
So it's just like it's Christmas is a natural, just like a Thanksgiving, but it's a natural like time to be grateful. It's to be thankful like that I get to see my dad and my mom, and that I get to see my in-laws, and I get to see grandma, and I get to like hug somebody and look them in the eyes. I get to say I love you to people, and hear people say I love you too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was reminded like what's silly about that or embarrassing is that like those are the things that I should be doing every day. Like Christmas is just an excuse or a really easy time to do those without it feeling like um I don't know, it just feels very natural.
Yeah.
And I think that even to pause and reflect, like the holiday piece you talked about, like you have to take a day off and you have to not do much. You're hosting friends, and you're like probably not working on
Yeah.
Christmas Day other than like throwing wrapping paper in the garbage or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a kind of a pause from work. Those things are good to be doing week in and week out. And I just love that Christmas challenges us to live out those values in a way that feels like we have an excuse.
Yeah. And I think too, I'm just sitting here listening to you talk and thinking these are all Jesus things, you
Yeah.
know? Um, yeah. If you really again like boil down what I think Jesus was about, it's these kinds of things. Um, so I still think there's so much room, at least for me, in this like the birth of Christ, the the birth of all of these things in us, and to remind ourselves that we have it in us. And
Yeah.
we have it in us all year round, but December 25th and all the things around it help us remember. And I think, just to close, I think that's what we have been talking about and what we're excited to kind of keep pursuing this next year is just this idea of rituals, which is essentially a thing that we do to remind ourselves of what's true, to remind ourselves of the type of person we want to be. And Christmas is a ritual, and there are so many other things, and we're going to be talking about those, which makes me so excited. I'm so excited for 2023. But just kind of asking the question, like, what are we doing to infuse our life with meaning, and what kinds of things can remind us to do that? And that's what I think Christmas is for me, and what I'm looking forward to for this next year.
Me too. And we hope you'll keep following along. We hope you'll keep listening, and hopefully finding a couple ideas, maybe even like just be challenged to kind of like reflect on your, like what you're already thinking about for this Christmas and how you can now spend the next couple weeks during this window. Just being more thankful or more reflective or more challenged to be hopeful. Regardless of your takeaway, the hope is that as you're following along, you're just inspired to live a little bit more intentionally. And I'm thankful for the Christmas season, the ritual of it, because it's a reminder for all of us that these things, like you said, are in us, right? That we can anticipate, that we can all be a little bit more vulnerable to hope for better things to come for ourselves and for others. We all can be a bit more generous. We all can be a bit more patient. We all can be a bit better at giving love and more open to receiving love. And I love what you said about like just the Jesus part of it too, that he's this embodiment or archetypal story of somebody that lived those values out. And if we can be in a community or in a season that reminds us that we have that in us too, it's just encouraging to know that like I'm capable of those things. I'm capable of patience. I'm capable of generosity. I'm capable of love. And I just need to be reminded that that's in me so I can do it more regularly. So hopefully that can be encouraging to everybody.
Yeah. I think I'm just thinking of, maybe you can ask yourself this Christmas, why and what am I celebrating? And I think our wish, Peter, my wish for you is that you find hope and joy with whatever your answer is. So
I love it. Thanks for listening today. Merry
Thanks
Christmas.
for listening.
Merry Christmas to
Merry
everyone.
Christmas. See you in 2023.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.